Thank you very much, Chair. 1212, Chair, but if time is against me, I know you will humbly borrow me 10 minutes from your time. Thank you very much, Chair. NTPP, good afternoon. I know that when you are doing what we called then the attorney's board examination, where there's specific module on ethics, I know when you do a master of laws, you do an ethical clearance application. So that whenever you want to move on your research, you are ethically cleared. I'm not quite sure when you do a pupillage if there is a particular module specifically training prospective legal practitioners to focus on this expected ethical standard from legal practitioners. Is there one?
So, Chair, through you, is Honourable Member, Honourable Nqola referring to in the NPA?
No.
Generally?
I'm talking about, I spoke about attorneys in general. So, because I've never been involved in the pupillage curriculum. So I'm talking about, is there a module that specifically trains advocates on ethical standards expected of advocates of the High Court of South Africa?
I have to be honest, Chair, I don't know, but I certainly hope that there is.
Okay. Fortunately, we've got about 6-7 advocates in the room. They may later help, because I'm asking this particularly because the head of IDEC, Advocate Andrea Johnson, considered before this committee that she has been part of a recruitment panel that has actually employed her husband. Do you think that is that conduct ethically and legally correct?
I have to agree, on the face of it, it is very bad error of judgment. She should not have been on that panel. She agreed before this House as well that that was not something she should have done. And I agree with that. If your husband is on a potential candidate, you should not be on a panel. Although she explained the steps that she took to make sure that she wasn't part of his interview, but still, I think I agree, it was a bad error of judgment. I've only just received the information last week, and I'll look into it and see whether that was appropriate conduct, if there's anything that needs to be done about it. This was 20 years ago or so. She was a young prosecutor at the time, but it's certainly something that will need to be looked at, because on the face of it, it's a really bad error of judgment. She should not have been on that panel.
Thank you. General Khumalo, amongst other charges that he's facing, is a matter relating to an employment of a brigadier or an SAPS official. Amongst the issues that which have made IDEC or motivated IDEC to arrest General Khumalo is that particular matter. Do you think that Advocate Andrea Johnson should suffer the same consequences?
I don't know the details of the case involving the IDAC case, but what I can say is that context is sometimes everything, and one has to look at the evidence, the circumstances, the context of each case before you can decide whether the consequences should be the same or not.
So is it the evidence of the NTPP that until date, she has never received any form of update in respect of the IDEC case against General Dumisani Khumalo?
Can you please repeat that?
I'm saying is the evidence of the NDPP that until this date, she has never received an update or a report in relation to the case of IDEC against the head of crime intelligence, Lieutenant General Khumalo.
Thank you, Honorable Member. No, through you, Chair, that's not the case. I have certainly received high-level reports on this case prior to the arrest. That is the position.
Okay, let's start on prior the arrest. An adult male from Parliament goes to IDEC and alleges that they have got an intelligence information which they picked up from the doorstep, but does not bring that information, but bring the word of mouth that I picked up this, and then I'm going to do an affidavit with you explaining it. Then that informs the basis of the arrest of General Khumalo. So, was it supposed to happen like that, or how does it naturally become procedurally correct?
So, through you, Chair, to Honourable Member, the IDAC has certain processes which Andrea Johnson explained to this House. I'm not involved in those processes. But of course, the start of the process was the referral by one of the members, one of the honourable members of this House. But after that, I'm not aware of, the precise nature of those processes, except that I do know there's a preliminary investigation and there's potentially an investigation that will be authorized. But the IDAC has its internal processes to assess the evidence at each stage.
So you don't have the details of a case between an investigative directorate against corruption, which falls within the ambit of NPA, against the head of crime intelligence in the country?
That's correct. I don't have the details. As I explained earlier, the NPA, the National Director, is a review mechanism. I don't have the details of the case. And if General Khumalo or anyone else is aggrieved about that decision to prosecute, as I outlined earlier, they are at liberty to refer the matter, to bring a representation to the National Director to consider that matter, and then decide whether the decision of the IDAC head was correct or not.
Can I come to IDEC to lay a complaint against whoever and allege that I've got in possession, I am in possession of classified information, intelligence information, and I don't have a clearance certificate to handle classified intelligence information? Will IDEC be legally incorrect parameters to attend to such a case?
IDAC's mandate is to investigate crime. And in my view, if IDAC gets evidence of criminality, they have an obligation to investigate it. The other side of it is the legality, etc., can be disputed at a later stage. But I would think that IDAC's mandate requires it to investigate cases as such.
Oh, okay, maybe let's move on this one. Can a labor recruitment process of any institution become a criminal trial against anyone who was part of a panel or was part of a interview selection panel and all that? Can it be a criminal case?
Honourable Member, I have what Advocate Johnson mentioned in this House, that the way state capture happened was that critical people were recruited and replaced, many boards, etc., and in the granting of tenders, specific people are appointed to specific positions. That was her evidence. And I don't know what the evidence is surrounding just the recruitment. She also said that this was part of several other matters. And so, to answer your question crisply, it would depend on the evidence.
Okay. General Nqola appeared before the committee and narrated a story, a very sad story when you look at it from the face value. That there was a time when securing a warrant of arrest against an accused person was actually eminent. Eminent. To an extent that the prosecutor did sign, so when it was to be taken to a magistrate, so that a warrant of arrest is officially issued, that prosecutor received a call from the bosses. The bosses in this context would mean someone higher than him or her in the NPA. Then later came back and said, I am withdrawing my signature on this because I don't want to lose my job. Now, part of what 3.1 of the terms of reference of this committee is to investigate collusion. Whether there is collusion between state officials and crime syndicates. So have you noticed any form of collusion except that one that you don't want to mention his name here? We are going to mention later. But have you noticed from 2019 until this date, as you're presiding over the prosecuting authority, any form of or characters or features or signs of collusion by the NPA officials and crime syndicates?
Honorable Chair, I can't say that I've noticed collusion between NPA and crime syndicates, NPA members and crime syndicates. But what I can say is the OEA has been getting reports of compromised prosecutors who are involved in criminal activity that is under investigation. But organized crime syndicates, I can't say that I have that information.
Okay. Let's step out of that. 6 July 2025, General Nqola takes it to the public and alleges that NPA is playing part in aiding criminal syndicates to evade justice. Then since then until now, before we called you to this committee, what internal mechanisms has the NDPP established to ensure the truthfulness or the untruthfulness of the allegations, and to ensure that there are systematic mechanisms that are will actually enable NPA to avoid such kind of things? Because you'll remember, between me and you, we know that there are part of the cases, big cases, that have directly damaged the image of the NPA. So this is adding to that. So what did the NDPP do in between this time? Because I would ask, because, for example, the Chief Justice did issue out looking for evidence and all those things, because judges, judiciary. So what were the steps taken by the leadership of the NPA in attending to the matter? So,
look, these processes are unfolding in the Madlanga Commission as well as in the ad hoc. Now, we've testified, the National Commissioner has testified. I discussed it with Advocate Johnson, and I will be writing to the National Commissioner to ask him to reveal that we want the names of those prosecutors that General Nqola alleges is involved in any kind of criminal activity, because this is something that we have to investigate. There were no names mentioned. I don't know that he was pressed to reveal names in this committee, but he didn't reveal them. I wish he did. Would have made it easier for us as well.
Actually, I was the first member to ask him questions, and the first thing I said was that, tell us names.
And he didn't?
He did, to a certain extent.
Okay, so...
And passed others to General Khumalo.
Thank you, Chair. Those are the names that we need. And I will be writing to the National Commissioner to get that information, to make sure that's properly investigated. It's just that we need to time it, because there are these other inquiries that are going on, but it's an urgent matter that needs attention.
Okay. Let's take it back to your conversation with the evidence leader of your sentiments on infiltration of the NPA, which when you were explaining it, you said there are people within the organization who do not have the interest of justice at heart. Did you mean what we are experiencing now? Or you meant something completely different from what is accused by Lieutenant General Nqola?
I meant something different because you'll recall, Honorable Member, through you, Chair, that I made my comments before he did. And so I had no idea what he was going to be talking about. So they were not related.
Do you have internal mechanisms to detect and tackle corruption within the organization?
We have aspirant prosecutors go through a course. They go through ethical training as well. We have the Office of Ethics and Accountability that's been set up to be proactive in terms of and trying to create a culture of high standards of ethics, and as well as investigating thereafter reactively. We also have a hotline that any member of the public can make reports to, so that we can get the information regarding potentially unethical conduct by prosecutors.
Have you ever been invited to a meeting of the Interministerial Committee dealing with the political killings?
Sorry, Honorable Member, which meeting?
Meetings, interministerial meetings, dealing with political killings. You'll recall that PKTT is a born child of an interministerial committee where NPA is part of the PKTT.
Honorable Member, not that I can recall that I ever attended an interministerial committee meeting relating specifically to PKTT.
So you don't know how effective has NPA been in aiding the fight against political killings?
I have the statistics from the PKTT, and whether it's been effective or not, we have numbers, but we don't know the extent of this problem, but certainly there are people that have been arrested and have been charged. So we have those figures.
How many political killings matters have been prosecuted?
I'll have to get those figures. I don't have them at hand. But
You said you have.
Pardon me?
You said you have.
We have numbers. The NPA has numbers.
Okay. So as things stand, you don't know how many prosecutions out of the work of the PKTT and how many successful prosecutions out of the work of the PKTT NPA was part of.
I don't have those figures before me.
Okay. Can the NDPP later submit that information through writing? So on the PKTT dissolution, remember PKTT is a multidisciplinary team. On the dissolution of the PKTT, has there been an information sharing, consultation, briefing about the dissolution of the PKTT NPA is part of?
Chair, there's been no meeting with the police, not that I'm aware of, certainly not at national level. The National Commissioner did mention to me at some point that the Minister had ordered that the PKTT be disbanded, but that it had not happened. But that was not really a consultation, it was a casual...
So you heard it from the corridors?
I think you could call it a corridor talk. Yeah.
You were on the way walking out of a tea room, then you were briefed?
Absolutely, that's the way it happened. It was an informal conversation.
Okay. On your affidavit, on paragraph 6.3, you make mention of the criminal justice value chain, which I think is one important aspect if we are to fight crime effectively. Now, the common knowledge is that SAPS becomes the first point of entry in the criminal justice system. So, to what extent and in what occasions does IDEC become the first point of entry in the criminal justice value chain?
That's in terms of referrals, in terms of the NPA Act.
Okay. That's fine. Let's talk about the reasonable prospects of a successful prosecution. Do we have internal norms and standards that govern or that determines to what extent, what kind of evidence and that? Or it solely rests with that particular individual prosecutor to take that decision, then it can be overturned later?
Our prosecution policy sets out criteria to be considered in determining whether the standard is met.
Okay. Is IDEC independent?
IDEC is part of the NPA, and the independence of the NPA is guaranteed in the Constitution. I would say the National Prosecuting Authority is not sufficiently independent in that its financial and operational independence still needs to be addressed. The Minister has committed to dealing with this matter. I'm pleased she takes it very seriously, and this House, well, the Justice Committee, Portfolio Committee, has also dealt with this issue, and I'm hopeful. The Minister has indicated that there will be legislation, this matter will be dealt with before the end of this financial year. It is very, it affects the operations and effectiveness of the NPA broadly, not to have its own accounting officer in many ways. And so that is why I say it's not sufficiently independent, because the DG of Justice is the accounting officer of the NPA.
So the independence would mean that the NDPP be the accounting officer of the NPA?
There are options. That's the SARS model. And in fact, the SAPS as well. The National Commissioner is the accounting officer. In SARS, the SARS Commissioner is the accounting officer. So that is an option. Or it's having a chief executive officer is also an option. Those things need to be determined by the Minister.
So as part of your suggestion to Parliament, is that let there be legislative amendments to strengthen the independence of IDEC and the NPA as a whole?
Absolutely. That is a suggestion to Parliament, and when the Minister brings it to Parliament, as she has committed to, I certainly hope that there will be support from the committees to ensure that that happens.
Okay, because the terms of reference actually direct us to also investigate system failures, so that what we get from the testimonies actually inform how we move forward. Myself and you had got a very concerning situation of prosecutors being assassinated. Very worrying situation. Now, do these assassination of prosecutors suggest that it might be a work of some crime syndicates and stuff, trying to silence them on the basis of doing their work?
Is the Honourable Chair, is the Honourable Member saying within staff members? Did I understand the question correctly?
Let me repeat.
Thank you.
Myself and you have been, for quite a long time, been concerned by a growing assassination of prosecutors. And it turns out that in most cases, these assassinations are linked to the cases they're prosecuting. So, does this mean that this is as a result of the work of the alleged crime syndicates trying to silence silence the prosecutors from doing their work? It's off.
The short answer, Honourable Member, is certainly in the one case, it was people have been arrested, and it was clearly related to a case that the prosecutor was prosecuting involving organized criminals. In the other case, it is not clear whether it was directly linked, but that prosecutor was involved in prosecuting a bail application involving organized criminals. But no one's been arrested there, but certainly the circumstances suggest that it was a hit because nothing was taken. And you're right, it's a very serious and growing concern. In my 40 years of prosecuting, we've not been concerned about prosecutors being killed. Now, we are living in and it demonstrates what's happening in this country. And prosecutors being killed is a new phenomenon. Sadly, we've had police officers that have been killed in the past, but more often for firearms, I would think most of the cases. But now targeting prosecutors for the work that they do, and whistleblowers, and forensic investigators, is something that we as a country have to consider. And that is why I mentioned earlier when I was being led about whistleblower protection. We've asked for an increase in budget to protect prosecutors. These are expensive. It costs a lot of money. And you protect not just a prosecutor, you protect families. And it upsets your life. So it's a very serious issue that as a country, we need to look at how government needs to strengthen its protection mechanisms, also working with the private sector.
But has NPA done an internal assessment on the causal links on the assassination of prosecutors so that it helps you develop proper mechanisms to prevent that?
We've looked at the two recent cases and assessed and analyzed what happened there. Even though one of the cases was clearly because of the work, we have put in place mechanisms to strengthen the safety of prosecutors, our security and risk team in the NPA. We've got mechanisms for them to react at very short notice to give immediate security to prosecutors who feel the threat immediately. But of course, there's a process, if it's not an immediate threat, to assess the risk and to make sure that we protect the right prosecutors. But we will not compromise on the safety of prosecutors. And we've also been engaging with our external partners, with the Canadian government, with our Society of State Advocates, to get trainers in to assist prosecutors to be more proactive, to protect themselves in circumstances and not put themselves out to additional risk.
So out of all the prosecutors that were killed, there is only one case where the alleged perpetrators were arrested. I think the short answer is yes. I hope I have that right. The short answer is yes. We had 2 prosecutors that were killed this year. And another prosecutor that was killed in what looked like a hit. It was probably about 2 years ago. But there have not been arrests in those matters. There's been arrests only in the one case. But what are the bottlenecks? Because society expects, at least, that if a person is a police officer, is a prosecutor and stuff, expects that at least justice will quickly be done. But beyond that, as we attend with those families who lose their loved ones, we promise every time that we're going to prioritize this. The statements of NPA do promise that this matter will be prioritized, blah, 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 blah. So, but what are the bottlenecks so that if there is a way Parliament can meet halfway, we do that? What are the actual bottlenecks?
So, through you, Chair, this is a complication that we face with a lot of crimes, and one would expect, correctly so, not that other crimes are less serious, but when it is one of your own, that the police, the prosecutors work together and do everything possible to try to bring the perpetrators to book. What the challenges with investigating these matters are is something I think that's better dealt with by the police. But clearly, whether we have, we have more cameras installed, for example, in certain high-risk areas, so that the evidence could become more readily available. I don't know, but it's about the difficulty of getting witnesses, getting evidence, and also people coming forward to testify. So I think the police are best placed to, really talk about the challenges with investigations. I don't know what the challenges in these particular cases have been, but it's a challenge we're facing in dealing with crime in this country generally.
How does all this affect the morale of your staff?
It sends shockwaves through the organization. And, to lose one of your own who's working hard for justice in this country. I went to the home of Tracy Brown and Ilona Sambalula when they passed away. And speaking to the prosecutors, I spoke to one young female prosecutor, and she said, "Ma'am, we are warriors. When one of us falls, we keep fighting." And I feel incredibly touched by the strength of prosecutors who still fight the good fight in extremely dangerous and difficult circumstances. So trying to keep prosecutors motivated at a time when we are under attack in this way is extremely difficult. But I think a lot of prosecutors do the work because it's a calling to serve in a very real way. But something like this, it's very difficult to motivate prosecutors to keep fighting the good fight when we are under attack in this way. So the short answer to your question is, it sends shockwaves, and it really, prosecutors become very fearful.
Evidence suggests that there is a collusion between prosecutors and Metropolitan Police, to an extent that there are instances where EMPD, for example, would arrest someone outside their jurisdiction. In Soweto, which is JMPD. But still prosecutors are prosecuting those cases, even at the time when the arresting officer did not have a local standard to arrest because it was outside their jurisdiction. What is your take on that?
It's unacceptable. It is totally unacceptable. And these are things I urge the public. We have an Office for Ethics and Accountability. Please, when these things happen, you must bring it to our attention, because there's an absolute zero tolerance in the NPA for unethical conduct. And the only way we can act on this is if we get people reporting to us. The challenge with corruption is that two people are benefiting. And when these corrupt activities are happening in courts, the person that is receiving the benefit is not going to say that prosecutors are corrupt. So it's extremely difficult, but we have had some information coming through about certain courts where prosecutors are behaving in this manner, and those matters are under investigation by our OEA.
Will the NDPP be assessing all the cases brought by Metropolitan Police to check if they did have jurisdiction over those accused people?
Since the matter has come up, we must certainly do that. And I commit to this House that we will look into that issue.
What damage do you think all this fracas has done to the image of the Independent Prosecuting Authority?
There's damage to the entire system. We have to look at how the system functions. And the system is as strong as its weakest link. So these are all these issues are systemic issues. And of course, they damage the image of the NPA, they damage the independence of the police, of the Metro Police, of the court system. And that is why we need to look at how do we deal with all of these systemic challenges, because they are not going to go away. We need to, as a committee, seriously consider these issues to see how do we strengthen the system. And I'm sure I'll get questions later about the NPA and its image, and I can deal with that later.
Okay, Chair. That's all from me. Thank you.
Yeah, you must hand over to Honorable Sokanyile, because I was one.
Sure, I would be honored.